So, the saga of why. Let's try to give the background of the thing. What happened is the Beatles came to America, and the news people were, descended upon them really heavily, and they asked John who was his favorite songwriter, American songwriter. He says, Hoddy Nilsson. And then they asked Paul, well, what's your favorite group, American group? He says, Hoddy Nilsson. And then they ask Ringo, who is his favorite singer? And he says, Hoddy Nilsson. And then every one of all the boys say, Hoddy Nilsson, Hoddy Nilsson. And so the cry in the press went up, who is Harry Nilsson? Nobody knew. See, Harry was still working at the B of A down in the computer center. And at this point, he and I were knocking around trying to get some kind of itinerary together for his his big event. His big event was we were gonna take our wives out to the movies. I mean, come on, that was the major thing. So he had not yet hit it, and there were at that time, Inagata-Davida was big time. It was like very loud, very brash stuff. And meanwhile, he's doing stuff like bum ba da ba da bum bum ba dum bum ba bum ba dum bum ba ba, kind of stuff. I sit alone in the chair, and so this going on, and this is Inagata-Davida, honey. By the way, Inagata-Davida, in case you didn't know this little insider thing from the Hollywood Insider, is when he's singing the lyrics to that Inagata-Davida, he was so stoned he couldn't say the right lyrics, which were in the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden became Inagata-Davida, honey. And that's what they guessed. Anyway, it's just a little side thing from the 60s, If you can remember the 60s, you were not there, apparently. I was there. I was not there, because I do remember that. I remember vividly the 60s. Probably because I did not abuse substances. I think that may be a big reason why. Let's see, where was I going with?
So you and Harry were getting your itinerary together.
Oh, yeah. And he hears over the loudspeaker at work. He hears his own music coming. So he quit. He goes to his boss. He says, "I'm quitting." He says, "Why?" He says, and he points up to the ceiling. And his songs are coming over the speaker. So he quit at the bank. He still didn't have any money yet, but he quit at the bank. And he had $70 in his pocket when he quit the bank, actually. $70 total to his name. And he was raised by a woman who basically made a living passing bad checks. I mean, this is, and he always had a tough time financially until he actually hit as a songwriter and as a songwriter. He was never a performer. He never performed, not really. He reluctantly sang his own songs when he couldn't get anybody else to do it. And that he became popular, but he didn't really want to be a singer.
Maybe
Yeah. So how come that happened, right? Oh, that's what it is. So how come all the Beatles say Hoddy Nilsson? The reason is, and nobody knows this, I'm serious, I've looked online, I've looked on all kinds of things, even Wikipedia, the be-all, end-all of ancient knowledge, but nobody seems to actually know. I will tell you, I was there. I'm probably the last living person who was there to tell you this story. Here's what actually happened. Derek Taylor came to visit. Derek was this wonderful publicity guy. He's a publicist from England. I think he was probably, I don't know, a few years our senior, I mean. He was this kind of very thin guy, kind of bearded character, Van Dyke type guy. Very, very sophisticated, very, very elegant kind of guy. He was married. He had, I think, 4 or 5 kids, as I remember. And he lived in England most of the time, but he came to the States, and he came to visit. He came to visit the States, and Linda and I invited him to dinner at our house. So he came over to our house, and he was so excited about Harry. So he knew that he said, he said, I told the people at RCA, that I wanted to promote Howdy's album, and I would do it for nothing. They bloody turned me down. I said, give me a few copies of the album. They bloody said no. So he and I, that next day, I took him over to Wallach's Music City, which is only a block away from RCA. And Wallach's was owned by the brother of the man my dad worked for, my stepdad worked for. My stepdad was the marketing director of Capitol Records and signed the Beatles, actually. And he was Paul Donner Spencer. He's a very powerful man in the record industry. So the guy that owned Capitol Records, Wallach, his brother owned Wallach's Music City, which is the biggest record store in the world. There was no bigger. There wasn't a record they didn't have, and they had everything. The moment it came out on the street, they had it. Everything. They had it. So I took, Derek didn't know, so I went over to, we picked up Harry over at Studio, he was in Studio B doing some overdub work, and we went over to, Studio C, and we went over to Wallach's, carefully skirting Norms, which was, I think it was Norms, it was one of those horrible, it was Denny's or Norm's right next to RCA. It was awful. And anyway, you got to go around it because the smell is like, this burnt meat type smells, bad stuff. Anyway, went around, I think went over to Wallach's, got in there. And so Derek buys, with his own money, now his RCA's, cheap bastards, could have given him a carton of these things, and they would never have felt the push, But no, they didn't do it. So he goes to Walt. We get the carton of LPs, and we split the carton up into thirds. So each of us takes some of the LPs back, right, over under our arms, right? And we get to the car, goes down. So he packs these in his luggage, takes them back with him to England. And he's giving them out to people, making sure that people see this. This is Pandemonium Shadow Show. That's what it was. And so he's handing out Pandemonium Shadow Show to all these people now. I'll tell you the story of how Harry came over from Capitol. He was at Capitol originally. He was at our label, my dad's label, originally, and he went over to RCA, and I went with him over to RCA. So Derek had all these albums. So he gives the albums to the Beatles, give them to the boys, and the Fab Four have the album. Okay, now they took acid. They were on acid for 28 hours listening to this album. In particular, there's one piece on there called "You Can't Do That," which is a compilation of 17 Beatles albums, a bunch of Beatles songs kind of piled into each other like that, kind of overlapping each other. So it makes blends into one song, And they were very, very thrilled. They were really, really taken with that piece. Anyway, so they listened to it for 28 hours on acid. Of course they came to New York and said, Harry Nilsson, So that's the story of how that happened, and I'll tie that in with something else that happened with Harry. Because right after this, what happened, or actually during this, I think it was when they were first coming to America at that point. Before they arrived, yes, it was before they arrived in the States. I'll tell you what happened. Give me a moment, I'll come back and tell you this.